I've clicked record. You just need to click a little button there. So I've got most people are actually watching this on record. So those of you that are here live, thank you so much for joining me live. And if you're watching the recording, fantastic. And I literally have just had to decamp to a friend's house because we've had a power cut. So I'm not in my own space, but I think you can see me properly. It's mostly going to be sitting and standing. Might go down onto the floor on the mat, but anything that you don't do now, you can watch it again. You know, I'm going to send you the recording. Everyone's going to have the recording. In fact, oh yeah, I've got my mic on. You can all hear me okay? Yeah. And if you lose me at all, just unmute yourself and or give me a shout or give me a wave, but everything should be fine. So let's just start looking at the pelvic floor. And I've got some notes, just some very, very vague notes, because otherwise I'm likely to waffle, because I have so much to say on the matter of pelvic floors, because it's a huge passion of mine and something that we do not know enough about. And even after this hour, you will probably know more than most GPs will know. And that's not being negative about a GP at all. They know a lot about everything, but they then refer to people. So what you're hearing, you know, if you go and see your GP and say, oh, I'm leaking, or they'll probably give you a few standard things to do, but you won't get that full understanding, and they won't explain it. And in fact, on my courses, I've actually had midwives come to my courses because they don't, you know, they understand sort of the fundamentals, they understand the anatomy, but they don't really know what to do and how to progress forward. So, you know, it's really, really interesting. How few women actually join these workshops. I think I've got about 30 or 40 women coming to this workshop today, this free one. But honestly, trying to encourage women to actually take control and learn more about their pelvic floors is a very long, slow process. It's most women wait until things are so bad that they just have no other way to go. And that's not the time to do it. The time to do it is now. Whatever that time is, wherever you are, the time is now to start making a difference. And I know some of you will have come to my workshops before. Some of you do my Pilates, all of those things, fantastic, because I always look after pelvic floors, and I'm really in my classes talking about how we can do things most effectively for the pelvic floor. Because you might think exercises that you're doing are really, really great because you're doing yoga or Pilates, but some things, if you've got a prolapse or certain issues, could be causing your pelvic floor more harm. And hopefully from today's session, even though it's just an hour, you will then be able to understand, maybe this I could change. So we're going to be looking at what's happening now, what might have caused it, and what we can do moving forwards to improve the symptoms, but also to stop doing those things that maybe caused it in the first place, and look at changing. So I've got a model of a pelvis here, and this is a slightly smaller model than an actual pelvis. And you'll see here that this is a woman's pelvis. It has a very wide area of bone here. Men have a narrow area of bone. We also have 3 exits. Men have 2 exits. So they tend to have fewer problems with their pelvic floor. But if you've got a partner who's got prolapse, not prolapse issues, got issues, then with leakage, or then just, you know, you can share all the information that I'm telling you here. So this is a band of muscle, the pelvic floor, and it's supported in the pelvis. And the purpose of the pelvis is to support the pelvic organs. It connects to the pelvic floor, and it's got connections to the spine, and it has 47 muscle attachments. So basically, almost every move we do connects to the pelvis in some way. It moves the pelvis. Even just moving an arm, you'll find your pelvis is moving. So everything we do is connected to the pelvis. And so when I talk about pelvic floors, it's not just a pelvic floor. I remember when I had babies, I had the babies, and you know, they're between 25 and 30, my children, and you're told to do your squeezes. No idea how to do them, but that's what you're told. That's the only information we're given. So if that's the only information you know, and if at the moment you're just sort of going, oh, I've got to squeeze because we're talking about pelvic floors, hopefully after this, you will understand that isn't the only way to fix your pelvic floor, and it might actually be doing it more harm than good. So you've got this band of muscle. Within the pelvic cavity, we have the organs. We have the rectum, the bladder, and the uterus, all within this pelvic cavity. So it's protecting them, and they're sitting against the pelvic floor. So the pelvic floor is giving a lot of support. And the exits, we've got the anus, the vagina, and the urethra. So we've got these 3 exits here. And this band, this hammock of muscle, this pelvic floor area is supported by the tailbone and the pubic bone. And it's also connected to the 2 sit bones. So if you're sitting and you can just feel your sit bones on the chair, and you know that's sort of the edge of the pelvic floor, but also we've got that pubic bone and the tailbone connection. And sometimes when we're talking and when we're doing some of these exercises, you might want to touch those points just to feel that connection. And and I sort of encourage you just to sort of like maybe just put your tailbone and just sort of palpate onto your tailbone, just have that awareness of where it is, because so many women find it hard to connect with their pelvic floor because they really in their mind have no idea. And we all learn in different ways. It might be through breathing, it might be through closing your eyes and just going inside yourself, or touch. So whatever way, whatever I'm talking about you today, if you don't get it, you can't feel it, just pop your finger on your pubic bone, on the tailbone, and just sort of have a little wriggle and just sort of feel where that pelvic floor is. So you've got the pelvic floor, you've got that bony area here, and that's a lot of muscle that has no bone to support it, which is not really surprising. We have issues with the pelvic floor because that's a lot of weight to go through it. So let's just stand up a moment. Just stand up. You can stay seated if you want to and just watch me. But if you just take your feet out and squat down, can you feel how that pelvic floor is stretching? So when you squat down, that pelvic floor is stretching out. Those muscles are opening up like that. And when we lunge forwards, or we stretch forwards, it's stretching this way. So when we're walking, when we're stepping, when we're bending, that pelvic floor is getting movement. So just sort of get your awareness. And I will get you standing and sitting. Feel free, if you don't want to keep standing and sitting, stay seated and just understand it. But it's really important you understand how it all works. Now, the issues that happen with the pelvic floor is it needs to be flexible. So you've got it like a trampoline. You bounce down, it bounces back up again. Then what happens over time is the pelvic floor can become weak. Now, that's one of the issues we can have. And this can happen through childbirth. You're bearing down that childbirth, you've got that weight of that baby, and then the muscles get weak. So it could also, if you've got a job where you're lifting heavy things, it could be a job where you're singing, drama, it's putting a lot of pressure down into that pelvic floor. So there's lots of things that can cause, or on your feet a lot, can cause a weak pelvic floor. And that's where you might find you have leaks. You might leak when you cough or jump. You might have to go to the loo quite frequently. You might have bowel or wind issues. You might have difficulty holding in a tampon, or you might find that intercourse is, just let somebody back in. You might find that intercourse is quite unsatisfactory because there's just no muscle tone there. So a weak pelvic floor can have those sorts of issues going on. You also might feel a bulge in the vagina, or you might find when you exercise, you have to rush out and go to the loo. So they might be the symptoms of a weak pelvic floor. And certainly for me, I have been a fitness instructor all my adult life. I've taught Pilates for 20 years, and I had 3 children, and I was leaking. And, it wasn't the end of the world, but, I'd sort of jump over a curb and I might have a little leak. And I never knew when it was going to quite happen. And, the thought of, if I wanted to wear a dress and I didn't want to have a knicker line, I wanted to go with no knickers, that was never going to be an option. That kind of sounds really frivolous, but it's like you don't have the choice. And, if I was going to do sport, if I knew I was going to be doing star jumps, I knew I was going to be running, I'd put a pad in and I would leak just a little bit, but enough to make me think, it's going to get worse, because these symptoms, unless we can fix them, they're going to get worse. And 86% of leaks can be fixed. You just need to know how. So I was having these leaks and thinking, I don't know what to do, because it wasn't ruling my life, but it wasn't. I didn't want to have to live with a pad, and I'd seen my mother go through pads in an old people's home, and they're horrible. They cause urine infections, they're uncomfortable, they smell. So I did a course with a company called Adore Your Pelvic Floor, and I did their training so that I could then learn myself and train other people. So the program I've put together has come from this training that goes, it's a national health approved training. I used to run a 4-week workshop. I've now rewritten it into a it's going to be a 6-week program that you'll be able to buy if you'd like to. So that's going to be over 6 weeks. But using this training, but also other trainings I've done and through my own experience. So that's why I wanted to train as a pelvic floor coach. And I can absolutely tell you, I do not leak. Now, I have completely reversed those symptoms. So it is totally possible, but it's not overnight. None of these symptoms that you've got, whether it's a tiny leak or whether it's a full-on prolapse, have happened overnight. All happened over time. So don't think, oh, I've watched Sarah, I'm not going to have any more leaks. Why am I still leaking? It's going to take time. And also, as hormones change, the other thing that can cause this is menopause. So my biggest tip, if you are 40 plus, or you're perimenopausal to postmenopausal, whatever age, vaginal estrogen is a huge benefit. If you suffer from a type of, or you've had cancer, or there's a history of cancer that uses estrogen, and you've been told not to have HRT, in many cases you can still use vaginal estrogen, because it's like you'd need about 100 doses to get 1 dose of topical HRT. So it's aimed at the vagina. It doesn't travel so much around the body. It's very safe. And in the nice government guidelines, they say that every woman should have it. I don't agree with that, because every woman's the same. And I know some women who are actually on here today can't take it. It causes other issues. So it may be for you, it may not be. The pessaries, I think they're incredible. So that's the first thing to look at, because menopause, what that does is our vagina, our vulva loves estrogen, and then what happens is it just gets, so that weakness, it's not got that capacity to support that pelvic floor. So estrogen is a massive benefit. It also might be within your cycle. You might find some weeks you're fine, and then another week you're not so great and you have little leaks. Don't panic. Again, that's that hormone cycle when the estrogen levels are a little bit lower. So just know if that's your time, and that's the only time it's happening, keep a diary of when these leaks are happening, so that actually it is my cycle. I know maybe I do need to wear a pad now, but I know next week I'll be fine. And then still carry on doing things to improve those symptoms. But the estrogen is a thing that we can't really change. And collagen as well. I take a collagen supplement, because that's the other thing. It's like your trampoline's nice and bouncy, and it just gets a bit crackly and crickly. And when you bounce on something and it doesn't quite bounce up, it just sort of does that. So collagen's another thing that I would recommend. So that's your weak pelvic floor. The other thing that a lot of women don't realize is a tight pelvic floor. So if you've done my workshop, you will know all about tight pelvic floor, because it's a huge issue. So a tight pelvic floor could happen if you're asthmatic, if you've got IBS or any sort of bowel issues or tummy problems, where maybe you're holding yourself, you're tight, you've got diarrhea, constipation, all these things going on. If you're very stressed, and maybe if you've had surgery, any sort of abdominal surgery, and including childbirth, actually, if you've had an episiotomy, if you've had any cesarean, there's going to be tightness in different places. And I'll show you the symptoms of tightness. Could be if it's very painful putting in a tampon, if it's very painful having intercourse, if it's very painful when you go for a smear test, those things, it just feels very, very uncomfortable and tight. But also if it's very painful standing for periods of time, maybe it's painful having a bowel movement. But it also could be that you're rushing to the loo, or you have a whoops moment. So a lot of the symptoms duplicate. So it's very, very hard for me to say. You could tell me your symptoms, and it's very hard for me just to look at you and say, well, this is the problem. But if you told me I'm really, really stressed and I've got going through all this and it's really painful having sex, and probably it is tight. But we often have weakness as well, because we've been through life at the same time. So everything we are doing the movement, everything I'm going to be talking about is going to help tight pelvic floor and weak pelvic floor. The only thing that we're going to be looking at not doing if you have a tight pelvic floor is those Kegels, which is the one thing that we think, well, that's going to be beneficial because that's what I've always been told to do. I've got to squeeze, and actually they can be doing more harm. So I'm going to be helping you understand the anatomy so you can maybe assess that. But I would highly, highly recommend you go and get referred to a woman's health physio. You can do it privately. You can see them through the NHS. You might just have a long wait. But if you can see a woman's health physio, they can give you an internal examination. Some of them do an ultrasound scan, and they can really give you a good assessment. So, everything we're talking about is going to be really, really beneficial. But if you find actually, do you know what? I just need that. I need a little bit more clarity about what's going on so I know how to move forwards. Go and see a woman's health physio. That would be my top advice on that. So if you just want to pop your hand on your tummy a moment and just do a little cough. So if you just clear your throat and you'll feel your tummy will just push out. And that's intra-abdominal pressure. And what happens is we cough, the bladder pushes down and our pelvic floor lifts up to stop it. So in a nice, healthy pelvic floor, you've got this flexibility. We cough, pelvic floor comes up, exits are fine, nothing happens. And we carry on with our day. If you have a bad cough that's been happening for too long, or if you've got just this weak pelvic floor that's just not got that, it's not got that nice range of movement, it's just a little bit floppy, when we cough, instead of the pelvic floor sort of lifting up, it just sort of stays, it's a wall and leaks through. So that's where we have the leaks, if we've got a weak pelvic floor. If you've got a tight pelvic floor, think of it, so I'm going to say to you, hey, look at my biceps, aren't they strong? And I'm just going to walk around all day like this, and they're going to go weak. They're not going to stay strong, are they, if I just walk around like this all the time? So to make them strong, I need movement. I need to be using weights. I need to get movement going. If you've got a tight pelvic floor and everything's very tense, you're holding it here. Your pelvic floor, instead of down here, is up here. So when you cough, instead of it going lovely range of movement to protect you, it's sort of going like that. And it hasn't got the capacity to protect you when you cough and leak. So in that case, and in many, many women's cases, more and more these days, that pelvic floor needs to release. We need to learn to let go. So if you're thinking, well, I hope, I just want to be taught how to do those squeezes, that is not the most important thing. The most important thing is to understand the connection with the breath. And that is what I'm going to talk to you about. So let me just check I'm not waffling on. So let's stand up. You don't have to stay. You can stay seated for this if you'd like to, but I'm going to stand up because I just feel I can just breathe a bit better and just feel everything a little bit more. So you're going to have your feet flat on the floor, and all we're going to do is take a big breath in and out, and in and out, and then just let your arms go. Let your arms go. And then I want you just to breathe. I want you to breathe normally in through the nose. You can breathe out through your mouth or your nose, but breathing in through the nose. So we're going to breathe in and out. And if you look in the mirror, or maybe you're on the camera, you can see if your shoulders are lifting up and down, you're probably not filling those lungs fully. And what we want to aim for is a 360-degree breathing. So if you pop your fingertips on your rib cage and take that breath in, you should feel your ribs pulling apart. And then as you breathe out, that diaphragm contracts. We breathe in and out. And the rib cage expands. It expands at the front, it expands at the sides, and it expands at the back. And a good way to practice this is in different positions. So we're just doing it standing today. But what I would recommend you do is when you're lying in bed, lie on your side. Lie on your tummy, lie on your back, and just feel that breath. Because if we can breathe fully into the diaphragm rather than just little, remember I talked about asthmatic people, so that shallow breath, what we need the air to do is to expand the lungs, goes down into the belly and down into that pelvic floor. So the whole connection of the diaphragm and the pelvic floor is fundamental in our pelvic floor health. So we breathe in, the diaphragm expands, it presses down slightly, the tummy pushes out. You remember that we've got that connection with those deep abdominal muscles, and it fills the pelvic floor. As we breathe out, the pelvic floor contracts, the belly pulls in, and the diaphragm contracts. So that old thing where, you're saying you're going through a narrow space, breathe in. Actually, breathing in makes you bigger. It should make you bigger. So the first thing to practice is your breath going into your rib cage. Feel free to sit down. If you need to rest your legs, then I know I've got everyone, all different abilities here. So if you want to sit down, but happy to stay standing. So if you struggle feeling that chest expand and feeling that connection with the pelvic floor, it's something you're going to have to sort of imagine. I've got a little sort of gift that I will send out, which just shows that how it lifts up and down together. If you're not breathing fully into the rib cage, you're not breathing into that pelvic floor. The pelvic floor is not filling with air, it's not leaving, and you're not getting that movement. And if you're not getting that movement, what's happening is that pelvic floor is doing that. So when you go to cough and sneeze, it's not got that ability to protect you and to move. So that's absolutely fundamental. And so, you think, I bet probably people think, oh, of course I can breathe properly. Most people actually don't. So what I would recommend is getting one of those exercise bands or a scarf or a tie. If you do know you're struggling a little bit, getting that breath into the ribs. And when you're watching telly or just sitting, just sit with that band and just feel it expanding and contract, or put your hands there just for 5 or 10 minutes a day, just until you get that habit, because it's a habit we need to change. So first, we've got that breath connection. At no point do we want to bear down into that pelvic floor. So when I'm talking about breathing in, I'm not talking about bearing down. Just for a moment, just bear down, just press, so your tummy presses out. Can you feel how that presses against the pelvic floor? We do not want to be doing that. We want that breath to connect with that pelvic floor, filling, emptying, and filling the air. Absolutely fundamental. So what other things connect to the breath, so and to the pelvis? So we've got the pelvis here, we've got breath connection. Posture. So now just roll your shoulders forwards a moment and try and take a breath. Can you feel how hard it is to fill your lungs properly? Now, that's okay for 5 minutes while you're on your laptop. Maybe you're like this. But if you're on it all day, or on your phone all day, or you've just got into that habit of rolling your shoulders forwards, that is something that's going to have a huge effect on your pelvic floor. So if you catch yourself like this, you're going to get those shoulders back. Yoga, Pilates, anything that's opening the chest, strengthening these muscles around your back, really, really important. The same goes if you've got your shoulders back, you've got your bum sticking out, you're pregnant, your bum's sticking out, you're trying to breathe. Again, you don't get that full connection. So posture, really, really important. So where your shoulders are, where if your chin's sticking out like this again. So looking at doing exercise that's going to improve your posture. Movement. So we've got all the joints in the hips, so in the legs. So we'll look at hips in the moment, but strengthening. So if you've got weak thighs, when you bend down and try and pull up, you're getting a lot of pressure down into that pelvic floor. But what we want is, if you've got strong thighs, when you bend down and your glutes are working, or when you're walking, you're much stronger in those glutes and in those thighs, it's going to put less pressure on that pelvic floor. So it's also not only putting less pressure, it's getting movement into it. So, if you're sort of weak here and like walk a bit like that, your pelvic floor is not getting that movement. If you can stride and you've got those, you can feel as you press off, you squeeze those grips, you press off, then looking at strengthening glutes, thighs, hips. So your hip flexors, if you're very tight hip, you do a lot of sitting, you might have tightness here. So again, that's compromising that breath and the mobility of the hips. So you need to be able to stand tall and do some pelvic tilts and things like that. So looking at exercises that's going to strengthen here, another thing that can help you. And then going down to our feet. So a lot of people have bunions, roll forward, roll in. As they get older, they get bunions. So if you're rolling in, your thighs are often rolling in. Let's see if I can drop my camera a tiny bit. And you're losing that position of the feet. So you've sort of rolled in a little bit like that. And so your natural position, these muscles have got weak. So these need tightening up. So if you've got bad feet, you could definitely have a connection with a weak pelvic floor, because you've when we walk, we need to walk. So you're pressing through the middle two toes. So another thing to take a look at is, how am I walking? Am I pressing through the middle toes, or do my knees come in? Do my knees rock out? So maybe if you really got big foot issues, go and see a podiatrist. So that could be something to work from the bottom up. There's no one thing that's causing these pelvic floor issues. We need the whole body to work together, and we need that alignment. And we're never going to have perfect alignment. Everyone's got, things going on. So that's looking at where we need to keep strong. We need our feet flexible, walking with bare feet as much as possible. So, we're twisting into our ankles. We're not sort of tight here. If you're walking like that and you're slamming down onto the floor, it's going to jar. It's going to jar your knees. If you've got bad knees, we need to strengthen all around to protect the knees, because knee issues are going to feed up to the pelvic floor. So one more little thing we're going to look at that might be causing these issues is tightness in the hips. So you can sit down if you can't get onto the floor. I know there's some ladies who won't want to get onto the floor, but if you can sit onto the floor, and just all you're going to do, or do it when you're on your bed. I'll just do it now, and you do it when you're on your bed, and just have your feet apart and just let your knees go side to side. And just feel, actually, can you do that? Have you got that mobility? And then sit up taller. And if you find, actually, I can't do it unless I'm right back here, it's probably a tightness in the hips. And the other way of checking is you lie on your back and you bring your knee into your chest. So you can rest your head down and just bring that knee and lengthen that lower leg. And just feel how that feels. You're stretching through the pelvic floor, through the hip there. Take a few breaths, just feeling that stretching out. And then you can change. Make sure you do both sides, because we're often one-sided. So you take the other leg in and just stretch that lower leg out, and feel how it feels on that side. So, when you're like, mate, if you don't want to be down on the floor after this, just have a little go and feel, and then maybe circle your hips around. How does that feel? Are my hips tight? So we're not just looking at the pelvic floor. Hopefully you've got that by now. We're looking at what might be causing the issues that are going on with me. Is it your breathing? Is it you've got bad knees? And it could be all things mixed together, and we can't fix everything, but we can do what we can. So maybe you've got bad knees, so you don't walk anywhere. Okay, so maybe you do one exercise we do in chair Pilates is we sometimes put our arms across and we sit and get up and down from our chair a few times to strengthen. It's looking at different ways. So if you do have mobility issues, let me know, and I can send you a sample of my chair Pilates, because that can be really, really helpful, but also getting that mobility in the back. So I do a lot of talking. So feel free to take notes. Feel free to watch this again and trying those different positions that we're talking about. So what we're going to do now is a Kegel, which is a pelvic floor squeeze. And you'll find a lot of pelvic floor coaches not doing Kegels. They'll say we don't do Kegels, because what happens is women do them they do them incorrectly. They just sort of squeeze everywhere and they don't let go, because as I said, a lot of women have the issue, they don't let go. So we're going to do them, but we're going to really think about the letting go. And I want you to understand, does it feel tight? Does it feel painful? Can I connect with it? Because in my opinion, the reason I do them is, how can we understand how to let go if we don't know what it feels like to tighten? Sometimes you've got to put your shoulders up here to realize, actually, I'm really, really tight, in order to know what it feels like to lower them. So we're going to pull in that pelvic floor, doing a really effective Kegel exercise. So if you sit with your back against your chair, so you've got a bit of support there, ultimately, what we want is our pelvic floor to work when we're walking, standing, jumping, getting up, everything we're doing. But initially, what we need to do is get the connection in a position that's comfortable for us. So I'm going to teach you how to do this seated. But again, this is something you could do lying on your side, your back, your tummy, your hands and knees. And I want you to feel where you feel that connection and how you can best get connected there, so that you understand how it feels. Because unless we know how it feels, we don't know how to change it and how to fix it. So we're just going to sit on the chair And we're going to imagine that you are in a queue, you want to pass wind, you absolutely cannot let it happen. So you are just going to squeeze. You're just going to squeeze up. And probably what happens is your shoulders come up and your bum squeezes and your tummy tenses and you're all like that. And that's not what we want to be doing. What we're going to do now is we're going to pretend you're in your pajamas and you want to pass wind. Doesn't matter if a little bit passes. You don't want to make it too bad, but you're just going to, just a little bit is okay. So we're just going to relax. We're going to connect with that breath. Feel that chest expanding down into the belly, down into that pelvic floor. And then as we breathe out, we're just going to draw up about 30%. So we're just going to stop that wind passing, but without clenching. And then we're going to let go. Now, I shouldn't be able to see anything that's happening on you. You shouldn't be able to see anything that's happening on me because I'm not clenching my tummy. My bum hasn't lifted me from the chair. So we're going to try and let the buttocks relax. We're going to just soften into that. We're going to let the belly go. So breathing in. And as you breathe out, we're going to go from the back passage, just pull up gently and let it go. And then you can just keep doing that, just breathing out as you pull up, because the outward breath is that's when that pelvic floor is lifting. So remember, we breathe in, as we breathe out, that pelvic floor lifts. So we do the squeezes on the outward breath. And all these exits are connected. So by drawing up through the back passage, you've sort of got that curve and it pulls forward. So all the exits are working. If you've got a particular, if you're standing, you might want to draw up through the middle exit, but I'm just teaching you this one. And in my courses, we look at different ways of pulling up through the pelvic floor, fast and slow, and really getting a full connection. But I'm just teaching a really simple squeeze here that will help you get that connection, but without doing that. And you're always wanting to breathe with it. So you breathe out, you pull up, and then you let go. And it's getting into the knack of doing it without squeezing everything. So that's a very, very simple, effective Kegel. And it's getting that connection. So I urge you, if you, sort of got that, not quite sure where that is, you can put your finger on your tailbone. Lie on your side, lie on the other side, lie on your back, lie on your tummy. Try it in different positions. But if it hurts, if it feels painful, you're going to do it and you're going to really think about that letting go. And then tonight, when you're going to sleep, you're going to really think about the relaxing. You're not going to think about pulling up. You're going to think about that breath connection, because until you've got the breath connection, you're not going to get that pelvic floor connection. So start with the breath. Yeah, feel that. Yeah, feel that connection. Closing your eyes, just really focusing inside. And I know those that do my chair Pilates connect with this. We do this in every class. We really do try and connect with the breath and the pelvic floor. So you're doing the right things. So let me just talk about the different types of incontinence we have. So as I said, we've got this stress incontinence where if you jump, skip, and that's called stress incontinence. One thing we can do to help that is every day there are things that happen that like if you cough and sneeze, you're bearing down on that pelvic floor. This is called intra-abdominal pressure. So when we're breathing and the belly's filling with air, the pelvic floor is filling with air, it's called intra-abdominal pressure. And we're going to have intra-abdominal pressure. Everything we do, we lift something, we move, there's intra-abdominal pressure going into your body. But we can't stop it. We can't protect that pelvic floor and say we're never going to use intra-abdominal pressure, because it's a fact of life. It's how we move. It's everything we do. But we can look at things that might be overstressing. It might be putting too much intra-abdominal pressure in that we actually have control of, that we can change. So when you put your hands there to cough, put your hands there now. And this time as you cough, try pulling in. So try pulling up through that pelvic floor and you'll pull in. So breathing in, just a little cough. And as you do so, try pulling in. And that's called the knack maneuver. And it takes time, but it's using that pelvic floor squeeze when you're bearing down. So you might do it when you're lifting something. So when you're lifting, always use the outward breath when you're using the exertion. Because if you hold the breath or you breathe in, it's bearing down, that pelvic floor is getting too much pressure. So we can support it by breathing out and pulling up when we lift up. So we come up to stand and we lift up and we squeeze that pelvic floor. We cough, we squeeze that pelvic floor. We sneeze. It takes time, but something to practice for you to move on with, to stop that getting worse. So that's your stress incontinence. The muscles that actually have to do the most work are for urge incontinence, which is they've got to hold that bladder, they've got to hold those organs. They're just there the whole time, aren't they, working? So they're the ones that need a lot of support and need to be looked after. So urge incontinence, and I know I've had some questions about this. The other name for it is called overactive bladder, and it's where our bladder gets irritated and you're just having to go to the loo a lot. So you should be going for a wee about 6 to 8 times a day. And what happens is your bladder should be able to hold about 500 mils of water, but often when it gets to about 150, it starts to tell you it's full. And if you keep going when it's 150 mils, it's just going to tell you it's full at 150 mils. So often an overactive bladder is very, it just needs retraining. It needs retraining. And so the way we can do that is when it's telling you need to go to the loo, you distract it. You just don't go to the loo. And if you can train it in the day, it will be much more trainable at night. And I genuinely do not get up for a wee in the night. It's so rare. And I know that's a rare thing. Most women do. So if you're getting up once in the night, that's okay. Maybe if it's twice, our sleep's so important. Our sleep is so important for our stress levels. If you're tired and anxious, what happens? Your shoulders go up, your pelvic floor's tighter. All of these things work together to help relax that pelvic floor. So the more you can do to make your pelvic floor happy and you're not rushing to the loo and waking yourself up at night, the better. So just think, does my bladder actually need emptying? And the one thing you must not do is reduce your water intake. You need to be drinking in this time weather, if you're in England at the moment, probably 2 to 3 litres a day, or probably 3 litres a day in this temperature, but average about 2 litres a day. And if you're not drinking that amount because you're thinking, oh, I can't because I'm going to have a wee, you're going to cause more problems. You're going to cause constipation, then you're going to be bearing down when you have to have a bowel movement. So you need to drink. And it's also going to be hydrating the whole body. So do not cut down on fluid, sort the problem out. So think of that irritable bladder. What can you do? Curling your toes. Curl your toes, and there's a nerve that goes up into that pelvic floor, and it will reduce that urge to go for a wee. And it just shows that connection with feet and pelvic floor. When you get to the loo, maybe just sit on the edge. So you just sit on the edge, you just got a little bit of pressure on that pelvic floor area, and just take a moment to calm the bladder. So you don't just go, well, we're going to get the loo, wee, and force it out. You're gonna just try and calm your body. Breathe. Do some of those do some pelvic floor squeezes really fast. Try and tire it out a little bit, or just some slow ones, just to connect with it, just to stop it leaking. So pelvic floor squeezes, distraction, sitting on the edge of the loo, and then just take your time. You get to the loo, you sit there, and then you go. And the best way to empty your bladder is to sit forward slightly with a slight curve in your back. And what happens is it lets it flow. Because this is another thing to make a note of. How many times you go to the loo a day? We're talking about 6 to 8 times a day. If every time you go, you're rushing to the loo and you're forcing a pee, you're getting bearing down into that pelvic floor. That's what we're trying to protect. So you're doing all this work to fix it, and then you're having a pee and bearing down. So just try it after this, or next time you go to the loo, just lean forward slightly, slight bend in your back, and just feel how the pee just flows out so much more easily if you're in that position. So that's something you can do on a daily basis to stop those symptoms getting worse. So we're going to try and calm the bladder through changing habits. Maybe if you always go for a wee when you reach this particular point, go a different route so your body you've not got that brain connection. When you come in through the door, distract yourself before you go to the loo. So you're going to try things to just use a distraction and know, actually, you don't need a wee. We're just going to distract and do something, and then I'm going to go in my own time. Bowel movements, that's different. Wee, yes, we need to stop. And never stop, never do pelvic exercises when your pelvic floor exercises when you're mid-flow. You can do it maybe just to test, not first thing in the morning, but you can do it sort of test if it's leaking. But do your exercises. A great time to do some pelvic floor squeezes after you've had a wee. Everything's nice and relaxed, and you're in that nice position, and you can do some, a little bit of squeeze and release. So just some little tips on the different, and the other type of, you might have a overflow incontinence, which is where sometimes if you find you go to the loo and you don't quite empty your bladder properly, this will help, that little bend. But also you could sort of sit and do a few little pelvic tilts to help the urine go. And one thing that can really help is UTIs or cystitis if you suffer with urine infections. Always, if you have any kind of internal examination after intercourse, always go for a wee straight afterwards, and always empty your bladder fully. So that's that. Don't rush it. Take your time. We're as women particularly, I mean, how often do you say, I'm just going to nip to I'm going to rush for a wee, and I'll be back soon? You need to take your time. You need to let it all come out so that it's all, there will be a little bit left, but we want to clear it as much as possible. So hopefully that makes sense. So let's look at the next thing we're going to talk about. So we talked about the neck maneuver. I'm going to talk about prolapse. And what I hadn't really understood when I first did this course was that actually about 50% of women suffer with prolapse at some point. And often that's through childbirth, but it could be through all different reasons. But what happens is we have got our pelvic floor here supporting our organs. I've just got a little ball, just pretend that's all our organs sitting in there. So we've got our pelvic floor that needs to function well to support them from beneath. But at the top, we have these ligaments. And what happens over time, or through surgery, through overstress, through childbirth, these ligaments stretch, and ligaments can't be repaired naturally. They don't naturally tighten. So once they're lengthened, they're lengthened. And the only time that isn't the case is if you've got relaxing in your body post-pregnancy. So if you've got any children, grandchildren who are having babies, they've got that sort of 6 months afterwards before the relaxing's gone to actually that pelvic prolapse could pull up. And if you think of a prolapse, you've got all these organs, and think of them as like a net, like a bag of oranges, and they're just sort of sitting in there, and they're just moving around. So a prolapse is where everything's just moved. It's moved, and it maybe dropped down. And what I'm saying is we can't pull them back up, but we can. So we can't do anything about the top, but we can strengthen the muscles, get that mobility going, and adjust the position of them. So we can support them and manage the symptoms. And with prolapse, we have, so you've got your anus, and there above your anus, you've got your rectum. Above your vagina, you have got your uterus, and above your urethra, you have got your bladder. So these organs are sitting above those, the tubes. And what happens with a prolapse is it can either go down inside the tube that it's above, or it can push forwards or backwards against another tube. So for a rectocele, for example, is where the bladder pushes down, the rectum pushes forwards into the vaginal wall. And a cystocele, these are the two most commons, where the bladder pushes forwards into the uterus. So, it can be really disconcerting and uncomfortable having a prolapse. If it's a very mild, they have to go from stage 1 to 4. A stage 1, you might not even notice. A stage 2, you might have a few symptoms, but actually they're just dropped a little bit. A stage 3 is where you might feel it, might have a bulge, you might feel it, might find discomfort. And a stage 4 is where you really need to do something about it. It's where it's actually pushing outside the vagina wall or the rectum, whatever type of prolapse you've got. So for those, surgery can be an option, but that is going to be your last option, in my opinion, through my research, because about 30% of people need surgery again. And that's often because they use this sort of mesh to fix the ligaments. And then these women, they're sent off, they're given surgery, and then they're said, right, you're fine now to go. but they're not looking at, okay, why did that happen in the first place? What can I do to stop that happening again? And it just all happens again. So if you have had surgery or you're going to have surgery, any type of abdominal surgery, remember where you have surgery, it's going to be pushing in different places. You're going to have a weakness there. You need to absolutely do these, what I'm talking about. You need to lengthen, strengthen, mobilize, and get that mobility through that pelvic floor, or it's going to happen again. A much less invasive treatment is a pessary. Now, if anyone needs some information, and I will actually send out information there's a great Facebook group, it's an international one, but it just shows you how common pessaries are, and they're like a little rubber thing that you push up into your vagina and it holds things in place. And they can be absolutely life-changing. They can, they give people their life back because they can start doing that exercise. There's underwear you can wear for support. But also there is a lot you can do to manage your symptoms without having surgery. But if you have got a full prolapse of any kind, then looking at a pessary is probably a good place to start, as well as you're joining me here on this course. This is just the best thing to be doing, looking at what's happening, why it's happening, and what you can do. And if you join my full course, we'll have a one-to-one session as well at the end or before, and really talk you through what are your, once you've done the program, to work out what you've taken from it and how you can best move forwards for your life. Because I do know I have a slight prolapse, and I manage the symptoms. I know what to do. I will never do. So for example, let's look at some exercises that are going to make it worse. So if you squat, like we said, you squat down, that's really pushing. It's a lot of pressure down into that pelvic floor. If you squat down with heavy weights on your shoulders, can you imagine how much intra-abdominal pressure there is there? And I used to do body pump. It's quite fast and furious. You're changing weights, you're doing that. You've not got time to control it. You've not got time to really pull up through that pelvic floor when you're doing those exercises. So immediately I would say, put the weights down. Bring your feet closer together. And it's not that you can never do something again. It means you need to understand and you need to step back. So if you're doing like a workout program, I know a lot of people watching this do a regular workout program. If the program that you're doing is maybe making you leak a little bit more, you're noticing a little bit of a bulge, or you've got a prolapse and the symptoms are a little bit more symptomatic, okay, so we need to step back. Do not push through. Do not push through, because you're going to make it worse. And as I said, it doesn't mean you can't do things. It means you need to step back. Like curl ups. If your tummy bulges, it's that intra-abdominal pressure. So you need to be very aware of what's happening with your belly. And I've recorded my last week's, I teach a Pilates on a Wednesday, and I've recorded my last class I did. And I really talked through a lot of how to have that awareness of your belly bulging. And I'm going to send out the sample of that. And anyone that wants to do my regular Pilates, it's always very pelvic floor friendly, but also telling you how to progress it. So boat pose and teaser in Pilates, or boat pose in yoga, your legs are up, your arms are off the floor, so much intra-abdominal pressure, that V shape, you need to put your feet down. Double leg lifts, both legs off the ground, loads of intra-abdominal pressure, one leg at a time. So we need to step back. Anything that's making the belly bulge, a full plank or full push-up. If you are leaking, or if you've got a prolapse, go to your knees, even get into the box position. And actually the box position is a great position to do pelvic floor exercises, because it's really controlling. The other thing that a lot of women, a lot of athletes have weak pelvic floors. They can have a six pack. They look so fit and they're really tight. And this is, I think, what was the cause of me having my prolapse, was because I taught Pilates. And as an instructor, you were taught, hold your belly in. So it's like, right, how tight can I get my tummy in? And I've always been aware of having a tummy. So I just like hold it in. And what happens when you hold it in? Your pelvic floor is like that. And how many women hold their belly in? So just know it's okay to let go. It's okay to let go. Wear a baggier t-shirt so that, you can let go. And it doesn't mean slouching. It just means not always pulling in like that. And it's, yes, you need to pull in when you need to engage when we're doing like leg lifts or squats, but then you need to be able to let go. So what I'm trying to show you in this hour, and it's a very short time, I'm not, you're not going to be able to do this and go, oh yeah, great, I've learned, I had to fix my pelvic floor now. I'm giving you that awareness so you can go back and you can get on your back, and you can lie on your back and you can feel, can I get that breath connection? Can I get that pelvic floor connection? Maybe lie on your side, go on your hands and knees, on your tummy, and just connect with that pelvic floor. If you're very stressed, what can you do to avoid stress, to fix stress? So I do a daily workout. So exercise, yes, I'm toning and strengthening, but at the same time, it's relaxing so that stress is being reduced. Eat a healthy diet. Weight bearing down into that pelvic floor. If you're overweight, first you've got that stress about feeling overweight, you feel uncomfortable, but you've got that excess weight. So eating a healthy, nutritious diet, by all means, chat to me about, about all of these things, because this is how I help my clients move forward. So if you want to lose weight, it's going to help the weight on your pelvic floor, but it's also going to take the stress out of life. Going for a massage is not just a treat. It's something, if you've got tightness in your pelvic floor, if you can have a massage around your hips and your lower back, it's going to ease around your upper back. If you've got tightness, if you can't twist here, in my chair Pilates, we do a lot of movement like this and like this, because if you can't move your rib cage and you've got tightness here, again, that breath is compromised, the pelvic floor is compromised. So I think the last thing I want to talk to you about is constipation. So constipation, and that's the other thing, obviously, if you're having a bowel movement, you should be having a bowel movement every day. If you're not, and if you've just suddenly, you've always had one every 2 or 3 days and you're still having every 2 or 3 days, then okay, that's you. But we should be having at least one a day because we need to get rid of those toxins. But if you do suffer from constipation, you need to look at what might be causing it, because if you're every day having a bowel movement and every day you're forcing down into that pelvic floor, we're trying to step back and look at things that might be making it worse. And that bearing down is going to. So try when you have a bowel movement, maybe put your feet on a little step so you're lifting your knees, lean forwards. If the only change in this is if you have a rectocele or a rectal prolapse, sometimes actually sitting back can help more with the bowel movement. But letting it flow and maybe doing a little blowing out, so you're sort of feeling like that anus just sort of opening up. If you're suffering with wind or loose bowels movements, maybe just at the end of your bowel movement, always squeeze up through the sphincter, close it off, and really get into the practice of always closing that there. But all for bowel and wind leakage, all the exercises we're talking about are going to be helping that as well. And I know that is a big issue. A lot of women don't even admit to it or talk about it, but I know it's there, and some women do talk to me about it, and I know it's a horrible thing to have to deal with. So everything we've talked about today is going to help the bowel as well. So looking at your bowel movements, there's something called the Bristol stool charts, which you can Google it and it will tell you how your poos should look to be in the right consistency. And it might be telling you that you need to be more hydrated, you might need more fiber, whatever it is. And just a little tip is, if you are having trouble having a bowel movement, put your thumbs onto the lower back and just have a little massage there. And that can sometimes help it pass more easily. So I hope that was helpful. The idea of today was to help you understand the anatomy, look at what might be happening to you, look at what you could be doing in the future. I'm really happy to have a chat with anyone. I'll do a free 15-minute chat to talk you through your symptoms and work out what might be best for you. I'm currently recorded a program, which I've got some people testing it at the moment. But at the moment, if anyone wants to buy, I've got new videos that I'm putting together as we speak. And it'll be £250 when it's all put together with the exercises. This at the moment, it's £99, and you'll get 6 workouts, half an hour. So it'll be over 6 weeks. And there'll be also exercises to go with it. And also over that time, you'll have free access to my Pilates class on a Wednesday or a Monday. You can choose. Or the other thing is, if you feel okay and you just feel like it's exercise you need, if you want to join my Pilates class, I will send you a sample workout of the Pilates class, and I'll send you a sample workout of my chair Pilates as well. So if you're less mobile, have a look at that one. So you can try those. And I charge £8 a week. You book in a block and you can do one or both classes for that amount. And my next block starts at the bank on the straight after the bank holiday, so the first week of September. So I'll send you links to those. And I know, so those of you that already come to my classes, if you've got any questions, feel free to ask me. If you want to join the pelvic floor program, it's going to be online. Let me know about that. And if you want to join Pilates, but if you've got any questions, anything I've missed, if I didn't answer your question, reach out to me, ask me, and I will help you as much as I can. So I'm going to stop the recording now. Just want to give me a thumb